Light, brought to you by FEMA and the Ad.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown. Your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks, friends, for joining us today on The Line of Fire. Here's the number to call, 866-34-TRUTH. I'm going to go to the phones momentarily. Just another reminder, now is the time to make plans. February of next year is going to be here before you know it. Come on, we're in March already, March 2018. Donald Trump has announced he's running again in 2020, all right? Time flies. February 1st through 10th next year, trip of a lifetime to Israel. Join me there. Go to my website, Ask Dr. Brown, askdrbrown.org, to find out more and sign up today. With all these trips, space is always limited, and the earlier you get your deposit in, the better. Also, please be in prayer for me, and if you feel led to help financially, wonderful. Later in May, I've got some unique plans of some Jewish evangelism I'm going to be involved in. Can't say more than that now, but some unique plans for Jewish evangelism. So please be in prayer for me with that. And also, I'm speaking at a very controversial conference, very strongly pro-Palestinian, kind of Israel-bashing conference, Christ at the Checkpoint. I've been asked to come in and bring a view that's going to be different than most of the other speakers. I want to bring a challenge to the Palestinian Christians there. It's going to be a pretty intense environment because I want to walk in love and speak the truth in an uncompromised way. So remember to pray, and if you want to help with expenses involved in that, going to Israel, and then aside from that, a special Jewish outreach I'll be involved in, just go to our website, askdrbrown.org, click on Donate. Your gift, large or small, is greatly appreciated. Lastly, remember you can still pre-order a signed, numbered copy of Playing with Holy Fire, a wake-up call to the Charismatic Pentecostal Church. We've gotten a great response already, advanced response for this book. There's real interest in it. I pull no punches. It's full of encouragement and truth, but I pull no punches, and you'll want to get this book out to as many people as you can. So you can still get collector's edition. It is signed, it is numbered with a scripture verse for you, and I have the joy of signing it to you. You get these special books. It helps with our ministry work as well. You can find out about that on my website. So all at askdrbrown.org, askdrbrown.org. Let's go to Ian in Fort Worth, Texas. Thanks for calling The Line of Fire.
Hey, Dr. Brown. Real quick before my question, I just wanted to thank you for a comment that you made. I'm Reformed, and I do believe that Israel coming back to their land is it's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and it's something that I've always found inconsistent amongst what I've noticed. A lot of Presbyterians is that they don't believe that. But you had said, shouldn't they at least acknowledge that in God's sovereignty,
right.
He brought them back? Because it wouldn't make any sense. Oh wow, it's just a coincidence.
Why did God sovereignly do something that is the exact opposite of what you would expect him to do if, in fact, Israel as a nation no longer has significance in the sight of God? Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And look, for me, I look back to some of the great Presbyterian leaders that inspired my own life. I mentioned a number of them, and the Puritans from whom I've learned so much. And so many of them had a tremendous heart for Israel. Samuel Rutherford, who's writing Spurgeon deeply prized as among the most spiritual writings in existence. According to Rutherford, he would put off going to heaven and being with Jesus if he could be here to see the Jewish people and Jesus the Messiah reconciled. That's how much he loved Israel and the Jewish people. But yeah, great. As to your question, sir.
My question was, now I do believe, like I said, that the Bible predicts the Jews coming back to the land. But I've heard interpretations of Isaiah 11:11, where it says that he will gather them a second time.
Yep.
Some people say that that's him talking about, first time was in Egypt, second time was the Babylonian captivity and bringing them back. And then the other, of course, is the first is Babylonian captivity, and then the second is what happened here recently.
Right. We do know there are other passages, for example, such as Jeremiah 16, where it says that with the regathering that's going to happen in the future, initially speaking of the Babylonian exile, that it's going to be so great that you'll forget about the return from Egypt, right? The difference there is that the scattering it speaks of from all around the world was greater than the Babylonian exile. So the Babylonian exile only fulfills these types of passages in part. And here, in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, verse 10, who shall stand as a banner to the people, for the Gentiles shall seek him, and his resting place shall be glorious. Well, this all happens way after the Babylonian exile, right? It shall come to pass in that day. So these are the days of the Messianic era. These are the days in which the Gentiles are looking to the Messiah. So it can't be referring to Babylonian exile only. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria and Egypt, from Patros and Cush, from Elam and Shinar, from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. So that full scattering had not happened. The islands of the sea and all these distant coastlands, that had not happened in the Babylonian exile. So it is either referring to Babylonian exile and the future, or if it's Egypt and then the Babylonian exile is the beginning of the world exile. Okay, and there's this massive exile which has continued through the centuries because there was never a full regathering from Babylon, only partial. So the full regathering is still something we're watching happen, and then will come to its conclusion when the Messiah returns. Otherwise, the passages are exaggerated by the prophets because the Jewish people were not that scattered at the time of the Babylonian exile, but they have been that scattered through history. And therefore, to me, the only legitimate view is that there is still a regathering that is future. Look at the promises, for example, in Ezekiel 36 and ask, were these fulfilled with the return of the Jews from Babylon? No, they weren't. Therefore, that promise remains to be fulfilled. Thank you, sir. Great question. 866-34-TRUTH. We go to Michael in Los Angeles. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for taking my call. I just want to ask you, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in the first century Jewish, when the apostles were alive, can you tell me how their daily activity was during Sabbath days in comparison to the Jewish today? And also, if you would compare that Sabbath day and the first day, which is Sunday, in terms of they were engaged in their activity in terms of teaching and taking care of the other Christians or in the community in general.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Number one, we don't know exactly. We cannot say for sure what first century Jewish practice was among the apostles and the first Jewish followers of the Messiah. We know certain things, that there were travel restrictions because Acts 1 mentions a Sabbath day's journey. We know that there was not normal work that was done. We know that there was gathering in the synagogues, but we know that there are differences in the different Jewish groups. And then many of the traditions we have come later, so we don't know exactly. There's dispute in some of the Dead Sea Scroll documents about different aspects of Sabbath law. But what was presupposed was that they were not working, that it was a sacred day for the Lord, that the travel was limited, and that there was attendance in synagogue or prayers at the temple. So that much we do know, and that would be self-evident, with the apostles going into the synagogue on the Sabbath, and they're obviously welcomed as fellow Jews. And we know Peter going to the temple at the time of prayer. That's just a daily thing. So there was a Jewish lifestyle that they still lived by as Jews living in that community. Now, it appears that by the end of the first century, you have evidence of believers gathering either early Sunday morning, because Sunday was a work day, early Sunday morning or Sunday after work to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Acts 20 is debated. Is it referring to Saturday night or Sunday night? Depends if it's a Jewish calendar versus a Roman calendar. All right, but we don't know a lot about this. It's several centuries before the church makes some statement about changing the Sabbath to Sunday. Nobody is thinking in those terms, okay? Either it was just understood the seventh-day Sabbath is given to Israel, or Christians would enter in and enter into that rest, the fulfillment being found in Jesus on a daily basis, etc. But there was no notion that Sunday had become the Sabbath in the early church. All right, this is centuries before this happens. So all we can tell, the best evidence that we have, is that by the end of the first century, there were some believers gathering to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus before or after work on a Sunday, but it was not the day of rest. The day of rest, the Sabbath, again, no normal work, limited travel, prayers in the synagogue or in the temple. These would be the normal activities. Beyond that, we can only speculate as exactly how they live. By the way, Todd, sorry I can't get to your question today and other questions. Sorry we can't get to everyone. But was Lucifer an archangel? I know of nothing that explicitly says that. And the text that we would look to for the most information would be Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14. But he was certainly highly prominent when he was Hillel ben Shachar, shining one, son of dawn, which in Latin becomes Lucifer, light bearer, which then gets used as a title for Satan. Hey, friends, may I ask you to pray for the salvation of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Whatever your own theological viewpoint about the end times and various theological questions having to do with the Jewish people, I hope you recognize with me that Jewish people need Jesus like everyone else. Pray that their eyes and hearts would be open to Yeshua, and pray for me and our team that will effectively be able to reach many Jewish people with the good news of the Messiah. Thanks for joining us today.